Thank you, Nancy, for those reminders, and it is a good reminder that we would not believe the pressure that some Christians face just for their beliefs and to keep them in prayers today. All right, kids' church, children's church, you guys can be dismissed at this time. Well, step by step, in God's timing, in this journey, we're getting a little bit further along in this journey. And I just wanted to thank you guys for your love and support. You know, everything is in God's timing. We were praying and praying for where God would send us. And then we got called to Zoah. And, you know, if you remember back, first you just got me, and I was here. And Tim and Karen graciously let me stay at their house. And then after a while, the kids went to Grandma and Grandpa's for a couple weeks, and my wife was able to join me, and which was good. I seriously only felt like I was half here, you know, until she arrived, and then when the kids got back from Grandma and Grandpa's, we outgrew Tim and Karen's, and Ted and Melanie graciously let us take over their entire upstairs, and so we've just been blessed with all the love and all the support. And as you heard, now we finally closed in our house. We've got beds to sleep in and a table to eat at. Still don't know where anything is at, but we have those things taken care of. And I'm just blessed to, again, step by step in this journey. Still, you know, love being here. Forgive me when I'm still messing up names. Names and faces, and I saw some new faces today, and they're new to me, and I just thank you all for allowing us to be here. Let's dive in today. Okay. So this month we're going to be putting our focus on prayer. We introduced last Sunday this idea of intentional prayer. And so intentional prayer, we're labeling it IP for short. I kind of play on the idea of an IP address. If you guys are tech people, you know, that's your computer's address so that in relation to the internet. And prayer is our connection, our network to God. And if we aren't intentional with that connection is going to be affected. Prayer is if we leave our prayer to accidents, or, you know, God is great, God is good, everything for our food. If those are our only connections with God, that connection is really going to suffer. So we want to be intentional with that. Intentional prayer means we have a plan. And last week we talked about having a time and a place, and that's the first step in being intentional, is setting aside time each day, having a place that you and God can meet together. And today we're going to be talking about a prayer plan to help with prayer itself. And this plan we're going to look at, it's been around for a while. Some of you it's going to be familiar with. Maybe you even use it, or maybe you remember it. Some of you it might be new to you. And some of it might be like that old recipe that I forgot about that. I haven't used that for a while. But it's this acronym A.C.T.S. A.C.T.S. And if you're familiar with it, each letter stands for something. And the A is adoration, the C is confession, the T is thanksgiving, and the S is supplication. And the idea is that this creates a more well-rounded prayer. It kind of balances our prayer life. It keeps us from treating God like a genie in a bottle or a divine vending machine where our prayers are only, you know, give me this and help me with this and give me, help me, give me, help me. This kind of well-rounds our prayer, and it makes it more of a relationship with God. It makes our prayers more balanced. And so in this series, truthfully, to be honest with you, we're not going to do 4 sermons on prayer. I mean, we're going to take each of these on a different day. So today is actually a sermon about adoration and what that means. So when we put these all together, then it's going to be a series about prayer. But each one is going to be unpacking each one of these ideas. So before we talk about this, let's pray. Father God, I pray that you would just enter into this place and open our hearts, our minds, speak through me, that your words would come across, that your ideas would come across through my efforts and my attempts. I just pray that you would speak through your word. speak through your Spirit as we just try to get our head around how big of a God you are. So let's stand and pray. Whether you, and this acts as A.C.T.S, it's not meant to be a legalistic thing like you have to pray this way, and every time you pray you got to have your boxes and you got to check them off. So it's not a legalistic thing, but it is a very important thing. So make sure when you pray, you realize who you're addressing. And I think that's why it's important to start with adoration. It puts God in perspective. It helps us to realize that when we are praying, we are approaching the throne of God. And I hate that picture, but it's the best one I could find because there wasn't copyright law or whatever. But how do we get this idea? We are entering the throne room of God, and so we don't want to take prayer lightly. And so this idea of adoration is beginning our prayer by acknowledging how big and how great God is. I love Disney World. We don't go a lot. We've only been a few times. But it's not a poor man's destination, so we've only been a few times. But I just love it. And everybody has an opinion about Disney World. I have had a few people that aren't crazy about it, but I just love it. I would love to go back sometime. And it's just a place that is, but if you haven't been, you can't really have an opinion about it. Like I said, some people aren't crazy about it, don't want to go back. Some people would go back, every year if they could. But if you haven't been there, it's hard to explain. Try to explain Disney World to somebody who's never been, and it's just kind of hard. It doesn't, the words don't do it justice. You can explain, kind of the things or whatever, but you can't really explain what it feels like. And they are so intentional with the sights, and the things you smell, and the things you hear. Everything plays into the magic that is Disney World. And if you are trying to explain it to somebody that hasn't been, they really need to be there. And our problem with talking about God and His glory is, it's not even that I'm trying to explain Disney World to you and you've never been. Like, imagine I have never been to Disney World, and I'm trying to explain it to you who have never been to Disney World. And how hard it is to try to get your words and explain something that is so beyond what we could experience. And so that is the dilemma of today's message, as we talk about how big God is and how worthy He is to be praised. So today, really what we're going to look at is, we're going to look at God's holiness. Holy is a word that we say it, we sing it in our songs, but do we get it? This idea of what holy means, or what holy is. Holy means set apart. It means something set apart for a special, a sacred purpose. Holy is not the best in a category. It is its own category. It is so set apart that nothing can compare to it. Holiness it's set apart. Remember the old Chris Tomlin song, indescribable, uncontainable. Awestruck, we fall to our knees. That is God's holiness. And today I want to remind us to be awestruck. And that's my goal today. So I believe sometimes our view of God can become distorted, not wrong, just out of balance. We live in a Christian culture in our country that has put a great emphasis on the grace of God, as it should be. We would be nowhere without the grace of God. But sometimes we've gotten out of balance and we've underestimated God's His judgment, His holiness, the fact that He needs to be revered and awed. Sometimes it's like a scale, and if we lose that side of God, we lose what's so amazing about grace in the first place. The grace is amazing because this holy God, this perfect God that nothing can compare to, so set apart, desired a relationship with us so bad that He bridged the gap when our sin separated us from Him. Our sin demanded to be paid for. Because God is set apart, He is holy, and He could not stand the sight of sin. He cannot be in the same room. It's like oil and water. Sin and God don't mix. But He did whatever it took to break down that. We'll talk more about that next week. But the idea of God's righteousness, His vengeance, is the whole reason that His grace is so powerful. We're going to take a look today at the throne room of God. We're going to look at Isaiah chapter 6. So if you want to turn there, it's going to be on the screen also. But Isaiah chapter 6, and Isaiah gets a glimpse into the throne room of God, something that we will, on this side of our lives, will never get to see probably. God allows Isaiah to see this vision. It starts in chapter 6, verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a throne, high and exalted, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphs, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their face, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of His glory. We're going to unpack that verse a little bit as we go through here. The year King Uzziah died is 740 BC. King Uzziah was a king, ruled for 52 years, most of them good. He had a mostly good reign. And that's just like a place marker. It's a way for us to know, this ties this to a day and time in history. This isn't a fairy tale. This happened in the year that King Uzziah died. I saw the Lord seated on a throne. The Lord was seated on a throne. So the first glimpse we need to see about God is He's in control. He's seated on the throne. He's not wringing His hands, nervously wondering what's going to happen. He's not pacing back and forth in the throne room, worried about the future and what's going to happen. He reigns sitting down because He's in control. There's nothing that outside of His control. If God wants something, I kind of talked about it in Sunday school today. If God wants something to happen, it's going to happen. If God doesn't want something to happen, it's not going to happen. So He is not up in heaven pacing back and forth. He's not anxious. He's reigning, sitting on His throne. That doesn't mean He isn't involved. That doesn't mean He isn't concerned. But He's not anxious. He's not worried. He's in control. Seated on the throne. He's not locked into time and space. The future doesn't worry Him. He's seated on the throne. It says high and lifted up. He's above everything. We've been to outer space and we haven't gone through heaven. We haven't passed through the throne room and seen that. So that high and lifted up isn't literally high that direction. He is above everything. The train of His robe. The train is a symbol of splendor. And so you see, kings and with the long trains, and it's just a symbol of their splendor, of their riches, of their glory, and His train fills the entire temple, Isaiah says. So we're looking at God's holiness, and the first thing I want you to get down is holiness describes separation. Here's this God that is apart from us. There's nothing we have that can compare to God. He's high and lifted up. He's above all. He's not anxious about the things we're anxious about. He's not worried about the things we're worried about. He's separated from us. He is holy. I want us to look at another throne scene. In Ezekiel, also gets a similar chance to see a glimpse into the throne room. And I'm just going to read this to you. And I want you to hear, here's Ezekiel, and he's seeing things that are beyond his comprehension. And so he's trying to explain it. He's trying to put it into words so that the people that are hearing it will understand what he's saying. I want to hear this, hear him struggling. I want to listen to all the language and some of the words he uses. This is Ezekiel 1:26, starting at 26. Is my eyes going to see? All right. Above the expanse, over their heads, was what looked like a throne of sapphire. And high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like glowing metal, as if he was full of fire. And that from there down, he looked like fire, and brilliant light surrounded him. like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the radiance around him. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell face down. Listen to all that. I mean, hear how he's trying. Because it was sort of like, it was like this, or it had the appearance of, he's trying to find human words for God's glory. And you can just, I've read that before and it didn't really sink in until I read it anew. How he's really struggling to find these words. I mean, it was sort of like a rainbow. It was sort of like a fire. It was like glowing metal. I can't really explain this thing that I saw. It was just so indescribable. And his response, when I saw it, I fell face down. That leads us to the next thing. Holiness demands caution. As we approach this God that is so beyond us, that is so glorious, we approach in awe and in caution. I mean, we long for God's companionship, and we are His children. But at the same time, there's that cautiousness of approaching that authority figure, in your life, and you don't always do it lightly. Holiness, it demands his caution. I want you to look back at Isaiah 6 and verse 2. We have these creatures, these seraphs that are flying, and they have 6 wings. 2 they cover their face, 2 they cover their feet, and with 2 they are flying. And with 2 they cover their faces. I think that's a symbol of hiding their face from God. And God in His splendor and His glory, the Bible says no man can look at the face of God. In His full glory, no one can look on that. So they hide their faces from God in His presence because His glory is so powerful. And they cover their feet, lest God see them. They're unworthy. There's this God that is holy and so far removed and so perfect and so glorious, lest they be seen by Him. And I think that's the symbols there of just how powerful being in the presence of God is. We see Isaiah's response in verse 5. Woe to me, I cried. I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips. I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. When we encounter God's holiness, we realize how small we are, how imperfect we are, how sinful we are. A perfect, holy God shines light on all the ways we fall short. Again, that's what makes grace so amazing. Sometimes I think in human arrogance, sometimes I think, and you've heard people say this, when I get to heaven, I'm going to tell God a thing or two, or I've got some questions for God, and in reality, you never see that response in the Bible. When people do encounter God, they're flat on their face before His presence. And so I think sometimes we have the wrong idea of what that day is going to be when we're truly exposed to God's glory. It's been a while back now. There was a big deal where a cartoonist had made this cartoon that making fun of Muhammad. And I don't know if you remember this back in the news. And then the Muslims just went crazy, and there was a very violent outreach to that. And although they're not appropriate, sometimes I wonder if we should be a little more offended when people misuse or misrepresent our God. Maybe we don't get offended enough when people insult our God or misrepresent Him. In Jewish culture, even today, not just ancient Jewish culture, they treat the word, just the name of God, so reverently. If you even, if you go on a website now and find a Jewish website, a religious website, a lot of times you'll see still the word of God isn't fully printed out. It'll be like G, even in English, it'll be like a G, and then an underscore, and then a D. The name of God is so special and so sacred that they don't even want to type it out. And because, what if that was typed out, and what if I printed it off? And then I was done with that piece of paper, and so I wadded it up, and I threw it in the trash can. I just threw away the name of God. I mean, that's how the sacred they see it, and how inappropriate that is, that name should be treasured, and it's not even worthy to be written down, because we don't want to misuse it. And so sometimes we so flippantly throw that around when it really should be honored and revered and treasured. Third thing about God's holiness is it declares His glory. We see these creatures and they're saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." I'm going to assume, I haven't been to heaven, I'm going to assume God gets His way in heaven. Would you assume that's a safe assumption that God gets His way? So He could have anything repeated over and over again that He wanted to, because He's kind of the boss. Loving, loving, loving. Merciful, merciful, merciful. Powerful, powerful, powerful. He could have chosen anything to be repeated over and over in heaven. And He chooses this word, holy. Holy, holy, holy. The attribute that God chose to highlight is His holiness. And that's, of course, is happening now. If we could miraculously see here into heaven, we would hear them, holy, holy, holy. And in this culture that the Bible was written, repetition shows emphasis, it shows power. We have suffixes. We have big, bigger, bigest. So, but in this language, in this culture, repetition is how you showed emphasis and power. So let's say a storm blows through Scottsburg. We say, "Oh, wow, that was some storm last night, right?" Let's say it was a pretty big storm. I mean, trees were down. We were out of power. Roads were okay. It doesn't take much to flood roads. That's not bad. That's not a very good example. All right. I'm learning. All right. So they might say that was a storm. I mean, it was not just a storm. It was a storm. And let's say it was like even worse than that, and a tornado had come through and buildings were destroyed, and it was a crisis. It was a storm. I mean, that's how they use language. And so the only thing in the Bible about God that's repeated 3 times is this. It's holy, holy, holy. He's worthy of praise and glory because He is holy. He is set apart. He is the only God. Worthy of praise. Everything that is made shouts God's glory, shouts God's existence. I just want to, like I said, my goal is to just for us to remember the awe of God. So I just want us to think, I'm about ready to close, but I just want us to, let's think about this world that God's created a little bit. The planet Earth, it tilts at a 23-degree axis to the sun, and if that was any different, life on Earth wouldn't be possible. Like the climate and everything would be totally affected if that tilt wasn't exactly what it was. So that's how that planet works that God chose to place us on. But you could fit 1.3 million planet Earths in the sun. 1.3 million planet Earths could fit in the sun, and the sun is not even a big star compared to other stars. It would take 1,000 lifetimes traveling at the speed of light to get across the Milky Way. 1,000 lifetimes at the speed. And God spoke this into existence. He said, "Let there be," and there was. God created things, and He holds all things together. He sustains all things. Who else could? I mean, this God that we approach in our prayers, that's the God that spoke this world into existence. And that was outer space. Let's look inside of ourselves. 60,000 miles of blood vessels. Adults have closer to 100,000. That would go around the world 2 times. Blood vessels somehow inside of our bodies. Our heart beats 100,000 times